Serious. What are some of the creepiest, most terrifying missing persons cases? Part 2. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. The story of J.C. Duggard. Abducted when she was 11, raped for years by a 50-year-old man and his wife, who was so complacent during the whole thing. J.C. was forced to give birth to not one, but 2 children at an age that she was nowhere near ready for. Had multiple miscarriages then on. Worst part, she was not that far from where she was taken. Even worser part, everyone in the neighborhood knew about her and just assumed that she was an autistic child that the rapist and rapist wife kept hidden away due to shame. The only reason they were found was because an old lady thought that a 50-year-old man's 2 kids, JC's kids, were too off-put to the outside world. If she never filed an anonymous complaint, they would have never been found. So many chances were had to catch the sack of shit, and each time they failed. Multiple police dispatches were sent to the guy's house due to loud cries, and each time they just assumed it was nothing. No precautions were taken, no initiative was enacted. Nothing. It took one paranoid old lady for anything to get done. It doesn't even end there. The police officers that were dispatched to the house multiple times ended up living in shame or damn near depressive grief. The neighbors were looked down upon for not saying anything. A few even had to fucking move due to the ridicule. JC's parents got divorced over their daughter's disappearance. So she had to come home to a broken family. The rapist hung himself and the wives stayed loyal, calling JC a slut for luring her husband to the wicked ways or some bullshit. JC became an atheist, to my knowledge, as she believes no loving God would allow such a thing to happen to a child. This I only heard of, as I have yet to find tangible evidence to back it up. Still fucked up to think about. She has trust issues with all men, and her daughters are still trying to adapt to a normal world. Overall, this case could have been solved within the first 2 years of it going down, but due to negligence, laziness, and incompetence, JC spent years of her life in a hellscape that I cannot even begin to imagine. Her childhood was taken away from her, she had to endure multiple failed pregnancies, painful rape, painful births, her lost faith in multiple things, and for what? For, as the rapist would put it, that sweet underage ass. Not a real quote from the guy, but it might as well be assumed because he kept her caged for over 14 years of her life. In the end, JC's case is one that is just more and more disheartening to hear. It gets even worse when you realize that multiple movies about her life were at one point in development, but were all cancelled as no version of the script could be made into an R rating, only NC-17. She deserved better. Presumably Tara Calico, but whoever is in this photo still disturbs me. Also, whenever brought up, I know many people on Reddit like to look down on others, say how naive it is to think this photograph is real. They used to take pictures like this as jokes when on family vacations. Look in that girl's eyes and tell me that isn't utter, complete disdain and hatred. This isn't a staged photo. This a photo that got away, from the era before selling people on the dark web was a thing. The case of Dennis Martin genuinely makes me cry. It's a case of a young boy who was kidnapped in a national park. Basically he is taken and there is no clues as to where he could even be. No one knows what happened, and the investigator put on the case to find him actually committed suicide. The father of Dennis said what happened ruined his life. When news reporters came to the father's house, one of them said, "This one won't make the air," and he asked why. The reporter said since the park was a huge asset to the community it wouldn't pass into the media, and it didn't. Plenty of searches for Dennis happened but nothing ever showed up. It's thought that wild people that live in the parks took Dennis. One way that could have actually happened was that a family saw something in the forest. Apparently in the trees a man was holding something over his shoulders but ran away. I know I was vague, but this still disturbs me a lot. The fact that the investigator killed himself, the idea that Dennis was abducted, just everything is so screwed up. Scrolled all the way to the bottom and was surprised to see that no one mentioned the Sauter children. I just listened to an episode of And That's Why We Drink podcast that featured their story. Christmas Eve, 1945. Mrs. Sauter wakes up to her house on fire. She and Mr. Sauter grab their youngest, a baby, and flee the burning building. After they get outside, they realize that their older children are still in the house and attempt to get back inside to save them. Unfortunately, the ladder that Mr. Sauter kept on the side of the house was missing. They went to a neighbor and called the fire department, but no one showed up for several hours because apparently the FD was operated by volunteers, who used a phone tree to reach each other, so by the time they arrived, the house had burnt to the ground. The parents were distraught when the firemen explained that there was nothing left of the children, not even their bones. At first, the Sodders believed this, but eventually they hired a scientist, I believe, who explained that the type of fire that burned the house down was nowhere near hot enough to burn a body to ash. At this point, the Sodders hired a PI to find the kids. They learned that multiple people saw the kids after the fire. One woman even claimed to have served them breakfast on Christmas morning. Another PI was hired years later. He disappeared while checking out a tip. The kids were never found. There are a lot of conspiracy theories, including one that claims the Sicilian mob took the children because Mr. Sodder spoke out against Mussolini. My personal favorite is that an insurance salesman who threatened Mr. Sodder months earlier took the kids. He was apparently trying to sell home insurance to Mr. Sodder, and when he refused to purchase any, the salesman told him that he was going to destroy the children and that they would burn in a fire. This man also served on the jury that decided it was an electrical fire. Not possible as the Christmas lights were still on while the fire was burning. I think multiple people were involved. Mr. Sodder was not well liked in his Italian community because of his anti-fascist Mussolini views. The case of Bryce Laspisa. There is a really great Crime Junkie podcast episode on the case. He was this totally normal kid, but when he came back for his sophomore year of college, he started drinking and taking drugs really heavily and just acting really strange and sort of erratic. His friends called his parents concerned, and finally, Bryce said to his parents that he had a lot to talk to them about. So that night he makes his way south to the town his parents lived, only 3 hours from his university. He should have arrived home late that night, but he didn't. His parents call and track him down, and he is in this little highway town only an hour away from where the parents lived. He apparently stopped because of car troubles. They get in contact with him and he says that he's okay, and he'll be home in a few hours. This cycle happens 3 or 4 more times. A couple of hours will go by, Bryce will say he is on his way, and then his parents call and he is still in the town. He does this until he has been in this small town for 9 hours, sitting in his car, for no discernible reason. He keeps telling them he is on his way, but he never leaves the town. Finally, after police do a wellness check and confirm he's okay, he starts making his way south to his parents. The last time his car is seen is on a highway camera. His car suddenly goes off the highway and up a large hill towards a lake. Then the same camera catches him going up the same hill again an hour later, but this time at full speed. This time he crashes the car at the foot of the hill, right at the edge of the lake. With the position of the camera, they can only see him going up the hill, but not where he crashed. He is never spotted leaving the scene, and his body is never found in the nearby lake or any of the surrounding area. He left all of his belongings and no activity has been recorded on his social or his bank account since that day. There are reports of a homeless man in the area that looks just like Bryce, and many people speculate that he got brain damage in the accident, forgot who he was, and just walked away, but nothing has ever been confirmed. In my small northern Michigan town in 1974, a 17-year-old boy was involved in a minor fender bender in front of our local theater. He'd had some trifling run-ins with the law, and fled the scene. They found his car on the freeway south of town, the doors open and the engine running. He was never heard from again. About 30 years later his brother got a phone call. The caller didn't identify himself, but he began chattering away in the same cartoon voice that the boys had used with each other when they were kids. Then he hung up. If it was indeed the missing brother, that was the last he was heard from. Back in April 2017, a student at my university, UBC, went missing around exam season, and it got to the point where it made provincial coverage. The last location they were able to pinpoint was a bridge near Stanley Park, where he had asked a taxi driver to drop him off. There hasn't been any news since, nor has he been found to my knowledge. It was both chilling and heartbreaking, seeing his missing posters plastered all over campus. We have 3 in our area, Eufaula, Oklahoma, in case anyone wants to Google them. 1. The Jameson family, disappeared in 2009. Their truck was located I think 3 days later, locked with the family dog, phones and $32,000 in cash still in the vehicle. The entire area was searched. Nothing found. In 2013 their skeletal remains were found 3 miles from the truck. 2. Tommy Estep, disappeared July 4th weekend 2013. His truck was found in September 2013. I think, wallet, cash, debit card in truck. .2017 His remains were found near where the vehicle was located. 3. Peggy McGuire. Disappeared November 2015. Her truck was dropped off at a local bar. It was rainy and you can see a figure walking away from it, but that's it. No other trace of her has ever been found. And #X200B. For such a small town and for this many people to go missing without a trace is just strange. The Boy in the Box. It's the one case that I'll never get over hearing about. It bothers me so much, I think in part because the artist's picture of him reminds me so much of my own child, and my own child had longer hair at that age too. But also just how tragic his case is. The finer details I found terrifying, and the fact he was dumped on the side of a road like rubbish just shows that whoever dumped him had no fear of being caught. That makes me feel so fucking angry, to be honest. I can't understand how somebody could hurt a child like that. Nobody has come forward or reported him missing. It just absolutely breaks my heart. Even down to his grave, no name but kept by residents of his city. Joe Pickler. He was a teen actor. You probably remember him as the brother in Beethoven's Third starring Judge Reinhold. He went missing after a night of partying with friends in his hometown. They have no answers and his family hasn't given up yet. It's believed he could have killed himself, but there's been no body evidence. He went missing in 2006. It's crazy to me that Hollywood didn't even mention this. Sure, he wasn't a big actor, but he was in a beloved children's film. This ends well. A neighbor and schoolmate of mine started getting emotionally disturbed during his final secondary school exams in '96. He lived under the good care of his parents for the next 20 years. In early 2016, as my father delivered milk in early morning, he heard a familiar cough in the dark. The guy had some sort of chest condition, and knew it was him and greeted him. It was the last anyone heard of him for the next 3.5 years. His parents looked for him in hospitals, jails, morgues and mental institutions all over the country. It got to me especially when I visited new towns, and I could not help but look around, especially when I heard the mother lament she better have a body to bury and have some closure. Luckily, this past Saturday, he was found living on the streets by a hawk-eyed fellow villager less than 7 kilometers from where I now live, 120 kilometers from where he was last seen. Get well, Macharia. Bryce Laspiza. His friends and girlfriend said he was acting weird during his semester at college. Bryce leaves to go home and keeps in touch with his parents. But his 7-hour drive becomes this 30-hour thing. There was a super helpful AAA employee who checked on him twice during the ordeal. His car is seen in CCTV going the same direction twice. Car is found overturned, but Bryce has never been seen since. The 6th-year anniversary is coming up. Mark Himibaugh of Cape May County, New Jersey. Mark was a year younger than my brother, and he went missing from near where our grandparents lived, so it always stuck out to my family, spooked my mom really badly because of how close in age he was to my brother. My grandmother still talked about it even after Alzheimer's set in with her. Every few years it seems like someone might start talking, or that more evidence is brought up, but nothing substantial yet. I drive by the area a lot still to this day on my way to the beach, and his disappearance crosses my mind every time. Here's a pretty recent article about the case. For 27 years, mystery lingers over missing boy. I recently listened to a podcast about this, but the disappearance of 4 senior citizens in Muskoka, Ontario. Each one had lived at these retirement homes run by this family. Turns out they would go out and find elders with no family or without proper mental capacity, seize power of attorney, and take their money. None of them have ever been charged for the missing people. This was over 20 years ago. They just recently began looking into it again, but it's so sad how these people have nobody fighting to keep their cases in the public eye.